And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara Podcast. Here's Jeff.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday to you. And if you're on the other side of the planet, happy Sunday to you. Today, we have Saturday Night Live podcast for you guys. And we have two guests tonight, one at 7 and one at 8. And one is already here. And I think we should just go ahead and get started. And then between the guests, I can give announcements and stuff like that. So let's bring her in. And I guess I will just introduce her before I bring her in. Her name is Dr. Maetreyii Ma. She's an award-winning author, psychologist, and spiritual teacher who has developed a worldwide following, bringing forth the deep wisdom that manifests to her both through her inner guru, Baba, and in her teacher, the renowned Indian mystic Sri Anandamurti Baba. Hope I got that right. Anyways, let's bring her in, and she is going to be right here. Maetreyii, welcome.
Hey, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you, and I was trying to see if I could say the name right. Sri Anandamurti Baba.
You got it. Sri Anandamurti Baba.
Well, how did you have a PhD in psychology, which first of all is amazing. And how did you get into all this yoga stuff?
Well, I got the PhD later.
Later, okay. You needed the yoga to be able to focus to get the PhD.
Yeah. It really started out when I was young, as a child with experiences of divine presence, I would say. And when there was some, the hippie days and the LSD and the incredible mystical experiences on LSD and then crashing and burning from that. And then reading about meditation, I took actually how it all started, I took a course in Eastern philosophy. And that course, I was at the Southern Illinois University, and the course was like, I realized, wow, the things I had experienced on LSD, like other people had experienced them and they didn't take any drugs, and it began to be all much more real for me. All the mystical connectedness began to be much more real. I realized this is something that happens. And so I developed a desire for meditation because I thought, well, I know that drugs are a look-see, but they're not a way through. And I wanted to really learn how to be in these states of deep unitive consciousness. And so I began to meditate. I lived in Southern Illinois, and I want to meditate. So I went up to the Theosophical Society and in near Wheaton, Illinois, near Chicago, and I got this book on how to meditate. I brought it home, and it said, "Don't meditate without a guru." And where am I going to get a guru? I live in the middle of a cornfield, And then the next week, two meditation teachers came to town. One was TM, and one was this orange-robed Swami from India called Dadaji. And so I got initiated into meditation practices by him, started regular twice-a-day meditation, and that was a long time ago, and that started things off for me. That's kind of how I began to be, and it wasn't long before I began to have deep mystical experiences in meditation, and I met Baba as an internal being, as a spiritual guide, as a representative of divine presence. I felt in this presence that I felt came in my meditation was incredible love like I've never known. And I fell in love with that divine presence that I'd felt as a kid too, a very holy presence. And I think, to me, Baba, my internal guide, is like a doorway. It's like not another person, but a doorway behind which you open the door, and infinity lies behind it. God, the cosmos, however you frame it, lies behind it. So it's a kind of a personalized form of that infinite self. And at times, every word would be like a drop of perfect beauty, perfect justice. As these words dropped in my mind, of the perfection of love, of truth. And it was like the facets of a diamond, these divine qualities manifested through this form. And it was really overpowering, and I felt such love. I don't think anybody in the wake of divine presence like that would feel anything but immense love.
When you say that Baba is your internal guide, would you also, or could you say that would be your higher self?
Yeah, I don't relate to that term completely, but I could, yes, the higher self, the self of all beings. What is the higher self, But the self of all beings, that which is in everything, and everything is in that, that higher self is that foundation of being, which every plant, every person, everything that is of that substance. That's the substantive nature.
Kind of like the collective energy of all.
Yeah.
Maybe what Christians would call the Holy Spirit.
Very, very much so, like that. That's what I perceive as or God, what is that divine, immense, intelligent consciousness that permeates everything, and in which the whole of creation has unfolded, right?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
For me, that my guru, Baba, as he appeared to me, was a kind of, rather than seeing him, I don't see him as a person or as another entity. I see him as a face, a facade on the infinite.
You mentioned that you had these divine experiences as a child. Can you expand on that? Like, what kind of experiences you were having?
They were simple, First of all, I was very connected to nature. And I felt the world of people and school and everything, that was people. I called it people world. And I felt connected to nature. But then when I was about 11 or 12, I began to feel that I would hug trees, and this energy would come out of the trees. And if I was disturbed from other kids and being at school and, just all the stuff that goes on, and I would hug the trees and I would feel this pure energy just come into me from trees, and it would just be like clouds drifting away. All the stress would go away and I would feel calm and peaceful. And so I felt like there were certain trees that were my friends. And then from there, it evolved into feeling that there was this presence, that I'd known this presence from the past, even though I lived in the suburbs of Chicago and I had never heard of reincarnation. It wasn't something that was in my reality of that time. But I felt like I'd been with this presence in the past, and that it was a divine and holy presence. At the time, I thought the only image I'd ever heard of like that was Christ, right? So I thought maybe it was Christ, but the presence never, it didn't talk to me back then. There was no guidance. It was just there, present. And sometimes I would feel there was this whitish form next to me, and I would go for long midnight moonlight walks with this one and rock on the bench and feel just this holy presence next to me. That was my childhood experience. There was no verbal communication, no guidance. That came later. And I'd never had a name, there was no name. It was just something very holy.
Do you have many colleagues that accept all this Eastern philosophy and subject matter that some people might consider to be woo-woo?
Yeah, actually, yes. And yeah, I think it's quite accepted. Well, of course, I live in California, but, by my peers, by other psychologists. Yeah, I think it's especially those who have studied consciousness and the nature of consciousness and quantum physics and how that relates to consciousness. Those who work with microdosing, with psychedelics is very big. I don't do that, but there's a very big group that does that, which all of these are leading people to unitive experiences. And so it's not just something from the East, it's something that people are experiencing and therefore aware of. And there's schools, like I went to the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. There's schools where transpersonal psychology is the focus, that which combines the psychological mind and the transpersonal experience. And so transpersonal psychology is very big. I think the first people, they didn't even know the name transpersonal psychology, such as Jung and the Saggioli. They were transpersonal psychologists.
Well, give me 1 second here because I want to get this right. You have a new book. It's called Into the Heart of the Infinite, a spiritual memoir of an extraordinary mystical journey. And in this book, you write about unitive consciousness. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, well, this book sort of goes through my journey of discovery and spiritual transformation from my early childhood experience until later, and all the things I went through in that. Unitive consciousness is, some people may call it God, I call it the infinite, it may be called the universe, but it is as if there's different stratums of, like, your intelligent awareness can operate on different stratums, right? When you're in a dream state, you're in a different state from your waking state. And when you go down into deep sleep, although you don't remember it, you're in a different state of consciousness. Through deep meditation, you can go through the conscious mind. Your awareness can go through the conscious mind to the subconscious, and then to the superconscious, to the state that you can actually access delta waves fully conscious, so that you're accessing that collective unconscious. You're accessing that state, which is a delta wave state, but is not accessible normally in deep sleep. But through deep meditation, you can access that. And that is an access to a unitive state of being where conscious awareness drops from duality, you and me, right? To the experience that there is a wholeness of being, a sameness, that everything is composed of the one infinite self, the one existence, one consciousness, one unitary whole, one God self, in which everything that is created abides. And so unitive consciousness is so coming into this deep state where there's usually a great feeling of bliss, a great feeling of incredible divine love and holiness and connectedness. Some people call it states of rapture. In Eastern philosophy, you call it samadhi. And that's where your conscious intelligence awareness moves from ordinary waking state into this deep stratum of being. And I have to say, my experience of that stratum of being is it's a deathless place, that it wouldn't matter if you're alive in a body or you've passed over. It is a place where there is no veil between. There is just a place of infinite love, infinite peace, infinite wholeness of being. It's kind of like returning home to, there's a restlessness in each of us. I think everybody experiences it. And maybe you think, well, if I have the right partner, then it'll be okay. If I have the house I always wanted, or if I have whatever it is, if I'm rich, then it'll be fine. Whatever it is that you think will do it for you, if I have the right job. But there's a restlessness that drives you to that. And ultimately, in yogic tradition, that's seen as a restlessness of spirit, because there's a deep longing inside us there's a natural state of longing to return to a state of completeness, a state where we feel, aha, we feel whole, we feel complete. And what is that? And this unitary wholeness of being, I think, is that state where it's like going home to completeness, to wholeness. It's like love fulfilled on a really deep level.
I assume you believe in reincarnation.
I didn't for a long time, but over time I got convinced.
Well, why do we keep coming back here over and over again, and especially enduring so much suffering?
Yeah. My feeling about that is that consciousness, it wants to return home to wholeness. We have separated out into a sense of I and mine. And we want to find that place of wholeness. And actually, the yogis say that you need to come into a physical body to really complete the journey. You can't just complete it on some heavenly realm or some higher loka or, some other realm. You got to come into physical existence. And so this life is our opportunity. It's our opportunity to find our wholeness, our opportunity to find our personal way, our path, our way home. And depending on how deeply we've found that, I think different things happen, and the need to return to physical form and and keep doing that journey as long as we need to do that journey is there. I don't know. That's my thought. I don't know if you have one on that.
I was thinking that is it the fact that that we leave home, no matter what our life here is, there's always going to be a certain amount of suffering because we're not home.
Yeah. Suffering is inherent in the human condition. We live in animal bodies, just as much as other animals. And inherently, they're suffering. These bodies get sick, they die, if nothing else. We feel loneliness, we feel separation, and separation causes pain because we want that wholeness of love, where love is fulfilled. It's inherent in our being. It's inherent in the human nature, is my feeling. We can lose our connectedness to it, that's for sure. But underneath our lostness, it's inherent. And I think we just keep trying to work it out until we work it out.
In your book, you write about transformation. What is your working definition of transformation?
Transformation, as I understand it, is moving from one frequency level, one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness. And whether it's higher or deeper, however you frame it. But when we do a transition, we move from one state to a psychologically, culturally, a state which is equivalent. We don't really go through transformation. But when we do go through transformation, there's a fundamental change. And the thing about transformation is it usually requires a deconstruction in order to reconstruct in a new level. And if you study the lives of people who've made a difference in this world, you'll find that often they went through some difficult period before their true work began. One example that comes to mind for me is Bucky Fuller, who invented the geodesic dome and a lot of theories about one world resource development. And Bucky lost a child when he was in his early years, before he really began his work, and went through an existential crisis. And in that crisis, he fell apart. He deconstructed what he had been, and he reconstructed himself at a different level. And that's when the creativity of his work came forward. But he had to undergo the tremendous grief of this loss and cope with what that was and what meaning was in life in order to go forward. And so there was a deconstruction of where he'd been. And I think that's what happens for us when we do go through a transformation. Even near-death experiences can be opportunities for transformation. You deconstruct what you have been and you reconstruct on another level. There's lots of different ways this can happen for people. And it's a powerful process. And it is a psychological process, a spiritual process, sometimes a physical process.
As a psychologist, have you worked with any near-death experiencers?
I would say no. I haven't had people directly that I work with who have been talking about or exploring near-death experience. As my work with the Spiritual Emergence Network, where I was one of the directors of the Spiritual Emergence Network, where we worked with people with, I had many calls from people with all sorts of psychic and spiritual crises. And there were near-death experiences, but it hasn't been a major part of my work, although I've read a lot about it. And I have been with people in their transition.
Have you ever had contact with a being on the other side?
Um, yeah, it's usually within the first week after, for me, within, I don't have that capacity to any psychic experiences of beings beyond, when they first leave. But I've had a number of beings when they're first leaving, they're a little confused about, they're either confused about what's happening to them or they have something pressing that they wanted done. For example, my husband's father, when he passed away, came to me because he was worried about his wife he was leaving behind, and he wanted to make sure, he wanted to ask me to take care of her, that would we take care of her, because he was worried about that. Another man, we stopped at the side of a road as an accident. A man had been thrown from the car. His wife was in the car still. She had not been thrown, but they were both badly injured. It was way out in the middle of nowhere in Utah, and took a half an hour for the ambulance to get there. And this man died with his head in my lap. And the ambulance did get there. It was clear the wife was going to survive. He didn't make it. And then we were driving, we got in the car and we were driving again, and this man came to me, and he was very confused about the fact that he was dead. He didn't really understand it, and he didn't really know what to do, and he was very worried about his wife, and he had a child at home. He was very worried, and I was able to tell him that she's going to be okay, she's going to make it, it's going to be all right, and you need to go to the light, not come here. Go to the light, so there's been different experiences. I once had a cat that walked around my house for a week. I don't think he wanted to leave. He was like in his routine, and he didn't really want to stop his routine. So things like that. But I've never seen any beings once they transited out of this realm. I think these beings were all transiting, and the body they show is just like their physical body, but it's a mental body, and you can read much more in it of their thoughts and feelings, and it's much more transparent in that way, but it is like a physical body.
How are you contacting them? In dreams, or is it some sort of
No,
like
they
a
just,
medium ability?
well, they just come to me. I don't know. I've never considered myself a medium. As I said, these are just people who needed help, and I'm empathic and intuitively sensitive, I would say. And so they found me, when they needed help. Yeah.
Are you also an astral traveler?
No, I don't think so. I don't. I've had, when my father died, he was in Chicago and I was here in Santa Rosa, or near San Francisco. And I sent my mind over there. I could see what was happening, but I don't think that's astral traveling. I don't think I really have ever done astral traveling.
It's kind of like remote viewing, it seems like you're
Yeah.
projecting your consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if you do meditation long enough, you know who calls on the phone, but the thing is, that's not the focus. That's the side effect,
Right. Oh,
You don't worry about that stuff. It's kind of like just side effects. As you become more subtle in your own energy field and in your own mind, the cosmic mind knows everything. The cosmic mind is omniscient. As you get closer to that, naturally certain things happen. It's not anything special, and it's not the focus. It's the side effect of being connected to something subtle and vast.
what do you think is the most effective form of meditation or type?
I think there's a lot of different types for different people, but I do think that whatever your type. I think there's also forms of meditation that are just to calm the mind and to get you able to focus at all, and that's a good thing. But eventually, if your intention in meditation is to connect with the God self, to connect with the divinity that's all around, that unitary consciousness, there needs to be a focus on that. Whether you use a mantra, whether you ideate on the form of a divine being, any form can be divine, any word can be holy if you have that intention. So it's setting the intention to connect with the divine. Now, the yogis say that divine grace is like a gentle rain that's always falling, and we hold up the umbrella of ego to keep that rain off of us so we don't feel it. But when we let go of that, when we let go, we feel that grace, and it's the grace that really heals us, that brings us home. It's not an achievement. And I think that's the fundamental difference. In most of life, we get what we want by trying to achieve it, right? And we avoid those things which would be uncomfortable, or we don't want to get sick. We don't want to, we don't want all those bad things, and we want those good things, right? And that's how we try to live our lives. But it also is the human condition of suffering, because eventually we do get sick. Eventually we do die. Eventually something happens. We don't always win that game, and most of us have a lot of setbacks in life where we're not winning the grab and avoid game. So it's not really what spirituality is about. You can't grab it. You can't hold it. You can't put the infinite in your hand and take hold of it. It's going to slide through your fingers. But what you can do is let go. You can ultimately, meditation practice is a self-surrender. It's a letting go. And letting go is, maybe you can let go of your attachments to outer things. But what about your attachment to your very sense of self, to your even to your bad feelings about yourself? Oh, I'm not worthy of that. Oh, I'm a limited, those are some of the really deep attachments, right? That are hard to say, okay, I surrender that. I let go of that. Whatever form of meditation you do, it's a letting go and opening up to what is. And that's where the transformation begins to come in, because then you've let down the shield, which is, I need this, I got to acquire this, or else I'm not safe, I'm not okay. And that's a very stressful circumstance, really. There's a lot of stress in this basic human situation. And to connect with divine spirit, that's not the process. The process is letting go and allowing and opening up.
Can you share with us some of your own personal setbacks and struggles that you've had to, help you actually, or force you in your own transformation of consciousness?
Yeah. I go into it in quite a bit of depth in my book, and I think that the things I struggled with are things that a lot of people struggle with in their own way, in their own form. Doubt, lack of trust, fear, and the ways they came across. What happened is, and also separating out, I had kept my mystical relationship to Baba and my own inner experiences very private my whole life. And, people who thought they knew me really well, I was very psychologically open. They didn't really know this part of me. I'd tell them about all my problems and this and that, but I wouldn't really tell them about my mystical side, because it just didn't seem, they might not approve, they might think it's weird. Maybe other people do this too. And I sort of hid my really essential being, and I learned to be acceptable to other people. And then in 1990, my guru left his body. And at that time, my inner Baba, my physical guru, left his body. And my inner Baba was guiding me that some transformation was going to happen for me. I was going to be, he was talking about this Guru Shakti. I didn't know what it meant, and he kept talking about it and talking about a transition into teaching. And I felt unworthy. That was, I think, the most talk about attachments. That was my big attachment. I went, oh, you must be, no, you're talking about someone else, surely, not me, it was, no, I can't teach, I can't. But what it was doing is it was forcing me out of this duplicity I had lived in, where I lived on a more psychological, be here now plane, but hid my real being. And it was forcing me that I had to sort of come out of the closet, if you will. And it was a huge transition. And I went into, none of this is, first I was going into grief that my guru died. And I also came back from India and the whole experience there with going to his cremation. And I went into this spiral of, oh no, none of this is real. No, this can't be happening to me. This doesn't happen to people like me. And I'm not worthy. So doubt, lack of trust in my divine guidance, and fear. And so I came to a point after a while where I just said, okay, this is some delusion over stress of, I analyzed it and I said, this isn't real. And I just sort of shut down all my guidance and everything and went, no, this isn't real. I'm just going to ignore it. The problem is then I started having terrible panic attacks because I had an inner conflict. I was trying to run away from something I couldn't run away from. And it caused panic attacks. And so I went through a couple of months, 2 or 3 months of these panic attacks. It was horrible. And then I finally went, okay, all right, I have to face this. I can't keep running. And my panic attacks went away, never to come back. And I surrendered. Okay, if I'm crazy, I'm crazy. If this is a delusion, it's a delusion. My guru is saying this is going to manifest. It will just take a little time. And it did. It manifested in these Baba talks, that I feel come from Baba and flow through. And I give these talks on a regular basis now for many years, and give these teachings that are from Baba. But it took a few years for that to settle in, I would say, and me to be able to bring that through. And I don't call it channeling because I don't see Baba as another entity. In a way, it's maybe, it doesn't come from my, I don't think about anything I'm going to say. I just fall back into the divine and I allow Baba to flow through. But I feel Baba is a manifestation of divine being rather than, so I consider like a manifestation of the higher self, some people would say. And so I give these talks, they don't come from I'm perfectly capable of intellectual talks, and I've given lots of yoga philosophy and other kinds of talks, but these are not from that level of mind. They're from another level.
When you're speaking, is your consciousness taking a back seat to this information that's coming from Baba?
I sort of settle into Baba and into divine presence and allow that to flow through. And it just is like a flow of words, and not just words, but vibration. And I get into the flow of it. And many times when it stops, I feel there's just white light everywhere. And, it's just very beautiful energy. And some people also feel the energy from these talks.
It kind of sounds like
The
channeling.
words yeah, it does. So you could call it channeling,
I
but the only define is not another entity. Like
right.
I'm channeling Sri Murti as a physical person that's now coming through. I don't see it in that way.
As a
But we all see things different.
As a psychologist, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts on channelers who do channel other beings?
Oh, I certainly know that people get a lot of very wonderful high energy. And sometimes I wonder if some of it is that being is how solid of a being is it, or is it really the Palladians? Is it really or is it divine consciousness taking a form?
I had a guest one time that's a pretty famous, if not one of the most famous channeler out there. And he said that they were doing an EEG on him while he was channeling, and his brain was in gamma state.
Yeah. Yeah, and they say that the brainwaves come from the back of the head, is an area in the back of the head is stimulated rather than anyway, it's a different pathway. Yeah. And different state of consciousness. And I think a lot of people do feel that high energy with it also. But not all channeling is that way, but some.
Right. Of your trips to India, can you share with us any powerful transformations that you had while you were over there?
Oh, a lot of things happened. I guess this isn't exactly a transformation, but it's an interesting story. When we were staying at the ashram, Baba was away for a while, and we went with my husband at the time, and I went with these two other men from the ashram, and we wanted to see Varanasi, so we went to the Varanasi to go to the Burning Ghats and sort of was a go on see some things.
What is the Varanasi? I'm sorry, what is that?
Benares, that's where they have these burning ghats along the Ganges River in the city of Benares, now called Varanasi.
Oh, okay.
Which is its traditional name. And it's for people who travel to India, it's sort of a tourist spot in a way because it's so interesting. So we stayed in a hotel and we headed down towards the Burning Ghats in the old city. And the old city had like 4-foot wide streets with brick buildings, a couple stories high that are, I don't know how old, a couple thousand years. I don't know how old they are, but it's old. And they'll have these little holes in the wall with a little shop in it, not like a whole big shop like we think of a shop, but little thing that you crawl in and you sit there and they show you things. And so we went there and we found a guide and he led us through and we went to the Burning Ghats. It was quite quite intense, going through these small streets, going into these shops. And the young Indian boy we had guiding us, like the guys insisted that we take tea. And he says, no, don't take tea. They will drug you, So we didn't take the tea. And then going down to where they had the bonfires and were burning the bodies, and it was right on the Ganges. And there were even boats with funeral pyres on them. So it was all very interesting. But then we went back as our guide guided us through this. It's just a maze. I don't think you can do it without a guide. And we ended up back in our hotel, but our friends who had left earlier than us it got to be night and they didn't come back. So later in the evening, they finally showed up, and the one of them was limping, and the other looked very distressed. And so they came in, and it turned out that they had gotten lost in the Burning Ghats, or in the old city, and they had run into an area there weren't so many people, and they had run into these gundas, which are cutthroats, and they had these big Gorka knives, which are these big curved knives, and they attacked them. And the one friend, David, he always had a bamboo Zen flute that he held close to his chest at all times. And the other man, who was sort of across one of those, narrow aisles, was being attacked by the one guy, and he stabbed him in the leg. So he did have a stab in his leg, but it was in soft tissue. It wasn't any big deal. And he saw David, the guy with the flute, up against the wall, and he saw the big Gorka knife go through David's waist. And David felt something like a knife cutting cardboard. And then his bamboo flute exploded in white light and knocked these two guys down, these two gundas, these two bandits. And then, of course, they were freaked out, so they ran away. And he no longer had this precious flute that he'd always loved, because it blew up in a thing of white light, which saved his life. And where the knife had apparently gone through, there were no marks. So, and I mean, this is direct from the people, who happened to. So a number of miraculous things happened in India and around my guru, and these kinds of things, you just kind of went with it.
It's amazing. If we get back to suffering for a moment, do you think that things like depression and anxiety and emotional pains are actually part of our spiritual path?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's when we strike bottom, when we really suffer, that we begin to look at our lives with more seriousness and to go, okay, why am I here? What is this life of mine? What is the meaning of my life? And you begin to get into that search for meaning. Like Viktor Frankl said, that everybody needs needs meaning. You need meaning in your life. And when you have meaning, you have purpose. And that search for meaning is really part of the human experience. And it's part of what I was calling that restless spirit that wants that unitary wholeness. And when we get disconnected from love and from wholeness, depression and anxiety become common experiences. And unfortunately, in our society, where there's so much alienation, lack of stable family systems, for 40,000 years, people lived in tribes and clans, and you knew who the people around you were, and you're going to always know them, and you know who you are in that context. Our society is very different. It's very mobile, very flexible, and it's kind of easy to get lost in it all and not feel as connected as you'd like to be to other people, which can really bring you into pain, sadness, fear, anxiety, because nothing's stable and solid. And so those feelings are rampant in our society right now. A lot of people suffer with it.
I had been thinking lately about if you look at social media like Facebook or something, you'll see like growing up in the 50s was so much different than growing up today, or growing up in the 70s was so much different than it was in the 50s. But I was thinking that if you go back far enough, probably even if you're in the 1800s, whether you grew up in 1850 or 1820, there was no difference. You know what I mean? Because technology has changed so much in the 20th century that every decade is completely different. But before then, life was probably not any different for 100 years.
Yeah, thousands of years. That's one thing I felt living in India for a while, is that I was in places where people had lived the way they were living for 5,000 years, nothing had really changed. I went to villages where it could have been 5,000 years ago, it's just nothing had changed. They didn't have any television, any radio, any refrigeration at that time. Of course, India has drastically changed since then, but at that time it was how it'd been. And our society went along that way for a long time, but now we are very global. We're interwoven with the internet, has changed our lives. We're all connected to each other. But what hasn't changed is our fundamental human needs as human beings, to be connected, to feel a sense of stability, to feel a sense of wholeness, to feel a sense of purpose and meaning, and to have a sense of love and connectedness and vitality, that we're part of something larger, something great, and even if you go in nature and you look around and you get that aha moment, where you go, it's beautiful. Or you're with a loved one and you look in their eyes and all the duality falls away and you're just lost in the moment of being. There's so many ways where we connect with that richness of being, with that wholeness we come from. But in meditation, we cultivate that connection. But there's so many times in our lives where that becomes hard to feel, and that causes pain. And it's part of our journey of, you little kid puts their hand on the hot stove, they figure out that the stove's hot. We could have trial and error, find our way, stumble our way through whatever our current reality is around us, and hope that we can find our journey of spirit and our journey of meaning to truth and love.
Do you think that technology is changing so quickly now that it's not only difficult to keep up with it psychologically and emotionally, but it's even more difficult to find this spiritual balance that you speak of?
Yes, yes. Is it more difficult to find the spiritual balance? Maybe. It depends on how you're relating to technology. I've had vision given to me by Baba, where Baba has said that a time will come. He's very positive about the future of humanity, saying, we are going to make it. I have a lot of people I know who think we were not going to make it, but Baba says we're going to make it. And he says that, we may come to the brink, but we will make it. And this is a period of transformation collectively. And that a time will come, not to reject technology, but when technology is so sophisticated that it leaves no footprint, and that people live among the great trees in complete harmony with nature on this planet, and there's no footprint, that technology can become subtle without the blaring problems that we have with it now. It's like a growing child. And so I look forward to that time when technology is more sustainable and blended.
I think one of the greatest things about the internet is that it has connected us all or most of us, more than we've ever been connected in history.
Yes. And what happens from there? We're connecting, we are realizing that we're part of a whole, right? The more connected we get, the more we realize that we're not just, we have our personal lives, but we're also part of a collective whole. And I think that as we can do things like this talk, we can be in different places, and yet we really connect. And that allows us to be part of this whole essence of being. It's because in a way, we need to go beyond our body-mind identity. That's the body-mind identity is one thing, but when there's love which transcends that, which love that feels that there is something more, something everywhere. And I'm regularly on internet programs where I just feel the love between people is so powerful. And it isn't bound by time and space. And when we all meditate together, you feel the energy of the other people. It's not bound by time and space. When you have the sense of their presence and you've connected, you feel it, and you go deep in that meditation with everybody. And what we think of as boundaries of time and space aren't exactly what they've appeared to be, I don't think.
Give me 1 second here. Once again, I want to let everybody know that your new book is called Into the Heart of the Infinite, a spiritual memoir of an extraordinary mystical journey. If people want to find out more about it, do they go to your website or Amazon?
They can go to Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can go to my website at yogama.info. That's yoga, YOGAMA.info. Yeah, and also you can learn more about my satsang and other programs I have available for people who
Well, what
want to
else?
go
Well,
deeper.
what else do you got going on that you want people to know about?
Well, I'm just beginning something new. Is 2 times a month I will do a Saturday satsang at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings, Pacific time. And it'll be online so that people can come from everywhere. And I'm hoping that we can gather a little group of seekers. I have another one that I do, but that's kind of closed. And so I'd like to gather another group of seekers who want to share with each other. And I do the Baba flow of talk, and we meditate together. So that's an opportunity for spiritual morning. And I also have a mentoring program for people who want to study with me. So those are two of the things that are happening for me. And I have other books,
That's
a
great.
bunch of other books.
If people have questions for you after watching this, are you open to that? And if so, how do they contact you?
How they contact me is if they sign up for my mailing list, which we don't mail a lot of things. We have a monthly newsletter, and it has a Baba talk and some tips for yogis and things like that, and some programs. If they sign up for the newsletter, then they can write below the sign up, they can write that they want to talk to me, and I will get back to them.
All right, perfect. Well, we're about to finish up, but before you go, can you leave everybody with one last positive message?
There is one love, one truth, one wholeness of being that we are all a part of. And that love is your own deepest nature. So I would say never put yourself down, never diminish yourself, because in your deepest, deepest nature, you are that infinite love.
That's great. Dr. Maetreyii, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you, and I wish you massive success in whatever you're doing.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to be here with you.
All right, thank you, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That was Dr. Maetreyii from San Francisco area. All right, before we bring in Michael, our dream detective, first I want to say a big thank you to Love Baris Akarsu. Thank you for the super thanks. We really appreciate that. And tomorrow night's video is going to be with hospice nurse Julie. I've had her on once before. I think it was a couple years ago. And she's back, and we talk about some interesting things, especially about how the body works relating to death and her own experience with an angel and more. So I wanted to kind of mention that and plug that for tomorrow. Also, if you look down in the description below, I'm going to keep adjusting my music here. In the description below, there's a link to our website, a link to our other YouTube channels. There is a link to my personal Facebook page. You're welcome to friend me. I'm accepting friends until I run out. I think Facebook gives you 5,000. And what you'll see there is my last name is Reynolds. Mara is my beloved wife. And so that may be new to you, but most of you probably already know that. And then there's our Facebook page. And by the way, if you go to our Facebook page, which the link is below, John Martin, who has come here and shown us UFOs live, sent me a video the other night of a live UFO that he took with his phone. And it's amazing. And it's one of the most unique UFOs I've ever seen. Most of the time they just look like a little dot of light. But this looks like some kind of something that it's actually, it's like projecting a beam of light, and you can see it kind of turn, and you can see like the beam of light shooting out. So it's really cool. And if you're into UFOs, I highly recommend it. Let's see, any more announcements before I bring Michael in here? Trying to think about that. Let me just kind of check here what I have going on here, that if I'm missing anything out. I do not have anything there that I'm missing. And let me look at the calendar real quick coming up this week. We have a guy that had an NDE, and then I think later on in life he had some other, I don't know if he was doing psychedelics or what he was doing, but he encountered the same beings that he did during his NDE. And then I have, let's see, it looks like some more UFO people and some more NDEs. And another international, I think, NDE from France. We just had one this week from Germany. So I'm trying to build up also our international NDE. So I think that should be really cool. All right. So I think that is it. Let's bring Michael in and see what he's up to. And he also has his new book out. And if you're new here, Michael Suarez is the dream detective, a dream analysis master. Maybe he'll be analyzing some dreams tonight. I don't know, but we'll find out what he's up to. And I'm going to be curious to be, and I think he saw the podcast and he commented about some things. So I want to get some ideas from him right off the bat. Michael, can you hear us, or can you hear me?
Yes, Jeff. Good
Welcome
evening.
back.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right, I think you saw that podcast with Selma Hare the other day.
Yeah.
And according to her, we don't dream. I mean, all dreams, in her opinion, are astral traveling, which in a way to me doesn't interfere with your analysis. I mean, you could be analyzing somebody's astral travel to the fourth or fifth dimension. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that dreams are just our imagination, or do you think they're astral traveling?
They can involve astral. I thought that was a super strange hypothesis, to be honest. I thought it was the kind of hypothesis where, like for me, right? I compared it to this. So in the clients and the people that I interpret for, 90% of them are energetic catharsis. This means that the person has some emotional feelings, and then that gets expressed in ingenious symbols which correspond to those feelings. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a dream. So I don't think there's any question about that. Astral traveling is a type of act. I mean, if a person is in the bathroom and they feel like a dreamer feels like they have to use the bathroom really bad or wash their hands, that I don't know why a person would categorize that as astral traveling, especially when a person like myself has hundreds and hundreds, now thousands of times said, look, when the person needs to use the bathroom really bad, they also were looking for a job really bad. You see how clear that connection is, right? So astral traveling, I felt like, again, see, now here's the step I think sometimes we're not making spiritually, or the little lessons. Like, I've learned that just because the majority of dreams, and I mean hundreds of them, are energetic catharsis, I still have both clients, friends, people in the community who tell me, oh, I went into a different type of dream where I visited my mom, or, we have plenty of testimonies where somebody died and then they came into the dream, at that time. So there is that mysterious overlapping spiritual component, but yeah, I don't know. I didn't really get it. I thought it was like an incomplete thought.
All right. Well, I just wanted to get your take on that. You have a new book out. It's called Love, Sex, and the Pursuit of Wholeness.
Can I just,
right?
So can I just say really quick, because I think this would be the best time. I wanted to just thank the guest that was just on. I want to thank you and Mara for bringing her on. I wrote her name down, but I still don't know how to pronounce it right, probably. Maetreyii Ma.
I think it's Maetreyii.
Maetreyii Ma. I just want to note, because we're going to be talking about this. One of the things she said is, like, this life is our opportunity to find wholeness. So you'll notice that overlap with the book. I also just want to thank her in the spirit, because today I was kind of struggling. I'm always trying to bring heaven to earth. That is my goal in what I do. But my frequency was struggling today. I just felt like I've been being tried this whole week. Like, there's so many trying things. And to be honest, like she said, as soon as she started talking, it started to affect my frequency. As soon as she started, and then she just kept going, like, it started to turn my frequency. I was like, yeah, right. So, like, in other words, there's both the frequency, and then it's happening at a psychological level. Like, she's making me remember spirit and spiritual perspective, which is kind of what I had lost a little bit, because I was like, okay, talk about this, don't talk about this. You know how it gets. You get into your mind. So sorry, I interrupted the introduction, though, but I just wanted to say that.
That is
really
okay, and I'm sure she appreciates your commentary.
Yeah.
And to me, it sounds like that she raised your frequency.
That's exactly what I'm saying. My testimony is, that's an example, y'all, of how we do this in the community, where she came on and I needed literally her type of spirit, because I was like, like pacing a bit and like, cranky. And when I stepped in, when she had that spirit, just calm, not even from the same traditions, by the way, right? But just I could vibe her spirit.
I wonder if this happens to you and everybody else in the audience, because it's pretty often that a guest will say something during the podcast when we're talking, and it's like something I needed to hear. And so I'm like saying it's about me a little bit, but
yeah.
And maybe everybody does that, but do you ever find yourself listening to any of our videos and saying, oh, I needed to hear that today?
Well, I feel like our whole community is based on that, almost like that'd be a great motto, right? Like, for the community, I needed to hear that today, right? Because I think the thing is, essentially, Jeff, whether, it's an NDE or a testimony, but I do think dreams have a special testimony. They encourage us to remember ourselves spiritually. And this thing that we are in, my understanding of it is, it's like a play. We come into it and we're participating so deeply, but we are not this, and I'll say this one thing, it's a slightly different subject, but so people understand where I'm coming from, why I would say that, and how the perspective of the community is. we are the beings, right? Like we think of myself as Michael. After Michael goes into the ground, after Michael dies, I will be reviewing Michael's life. You see, that's how I know I'm not Michael. That's how all of us will be. We are actually the resurrected being, which like we're participating in. Anyway, we're getting a little bit into the into a different aspect of it. But all these things do overlap ultimately with dreaming and the stuff that's happening in the subconscious realm.
All right, well, let's get back to your book. How did you come up with the title Love, Sex, and the Pursuit of Wholeness?
That's a great question, and one that I actually had to work out. So I wasn't going to start there, but I am going to start there. So because I think we're in good flow. So when I wrote the book, I was like, the way that I compile these books are every time that I do an interpretation, I always type it out. Right. And then after a while, I started to be like, maybe I can put together a compilation where I explain dreams and then I use examples. And then it was like, oh, I'll compile them thematically. And then the spirit was like, call it Dream Detective. So then I was like, oh, okay. So the first ones I chose were 7, like in volume 1, I did volume 1, and it was like, I chose all these messages that were amazing messages from within, very specific and personal to the dreamer, right? So, amazingly so, like shockingly so. So then with this one, I was like, well, what are the other type of dreams that often appear among those I'm interpreting for? And they were related to love, sex, desire. Now, I'll be more specific. This is a bit more on the adult side, but this includes everything from masturbation, pornography, divorce, marriage, all these, a whole bunch of subjects, but you can classify them generally as related to love and sex. And that is what I ended up writing the book about. So the book is, on one hand, it is how to interpret, it is the dreams that are expressing love and sexuality, first presented and then interpreted. And then we also reflect on what those ideas are. So the answer is, as I was reflecting on what the ideas are, what the essence of them towards the end of writing the book, I was like, oh, this is all about the pursuit of wholeness. Indeed, that's what dreaming is. Your dreaming is it's working on the issues of your wholeness. But here it became clear that first in the book, I talk about a central idea, as I explain, where in the symposium, because we do these reflections after a dream, I talk about, they had a mythology where they said that the way human beings were formed, try to get this, I'll try to make it quick and clear. The way the human beings were formed, according to this mythology, how love came to be, is there was one human being and it was pulled into two. And so from that point on, the being is always trying to find its other half, right? It's always seeking to become whole. We have that literally sexually, but most of all, we have that institutionalized in marriage and represented in relationships. Hopefully that's making sense. But I found that to be the overwhelming theme, even though I didn't know that was going to be it when I started the book.
Now, when you start talking about a being separating into two beings, that to me sounds like you're getting in the realm of what do they call that? Twin souls.
Well, yeah, I don't know too much about that or talk too much about, twin flames or have that idea, but I do talk in the book about this mythology. Now, when we say mythology, some people think that like they'll dismiss that, but the mythology, the power of it is it represents something that's happening. It explains or references what's happening in human beings. And one of the things that you see is people are trying to get satisfied, right? Now, for example, in our modern day, this gets very interesting because it used to be you would get satisfied by going into a relationship or getting married, right? They would be like, people still think of it as like this model. But now you can substitute things like pornography, for example. And so people take the pursuit of wholeness and they bury it there. So, yeah, hopefully.
All right. I mean, please don't get graphic here, but do people start sharing with you their own, dreams of adult
So
themes?
So sexual dreams are not typically sexual. Maybe that's a good way for people to think about it, because everything is symbolic. Okay. So for example, here's a very powerful dream, and it's relatively short. And it's one of the stars of this dream. So there was a dream where this person actually dreamt this about their friend. So they're telling me what they're concerned about with their friend. So they said, my friend was standing on top of a bunch of decaying, putrefying dog skeletons. And then suddenly the scene switched to her to her mother at the hospital with heart troubles. Okay, got that? So it's two basic scenes. It's one of these dreams where it's weird because, oh, it's shifted to another one, but that's fine. Don't worry about that. That actually has a meaning. That's where the detective part comes in. But the first thing is the image of a woman standing on top of a bunch of decaying dog skeletons, right? So this is how, for example, I'm answering the question. I want to make sure I'm clear about this. I'm going to explain what it is, but I'm answering this specific question about when someone's telling you a dream that's sexual, how, for example, does that get expressed? So in this dream, those dogs represented her relationships. So here's how it happened. She told me the dream, and then I thought about it, and I was like, bunch of dogs. And then the phrase came to me, just came to my head, was like, oh, men are all dogs. And I said to her, and so again, notice the detective work. I said to the dreamer, I said, is your friend like a very attractive woman who's had a whole bunch of toxic relationships? And she was like, what? Like, she was shocked. And I was like, oh, then boom, there it is, because I saw the whole narrative. As soon as you look at the picture, here's one of the mysteries and secrets of it, why really this is open to everybody. As soon as you look at the symbology will start to speak back to you. The symbology is telling you, you're just getting used to it. But anyway, so here, this is so profound, because this is one of the things I found, that when we're talking about dreams about love and sexuality, a lot of them are warnings. Woo, you better, like, that's a real notable one. Like, people getting divorced, people getting married, people thinking about cheating, all sorts of things like that. People with sexual addictions, those things get addressed. But to finish that thought, so she told me, she was like, well, what happened was my friend, after an ugly divorce, she just sort of went on a spree of being promiscuous and having all these toxic relationships, right? So what I was seeing was how that was being symbolized by her standing on these dogs, right? Which she thinks of as men. And all the fact that they're rotting in skeleton means that they're like rotting, toxic, putrid relationships. Now, I'll say one other thing, which just so for anybody who's paying attention, there was that end part where it says like, oh, and then then the scene went to the hospital where her mother was having heart trouble. That's because her friend was concerned about how this activity that she was doing would affect her as a mother, because she was a mother of a young daughter. So hopefully that made sense. You had to stay with it. But in other words, the woman she was thinking about was a mother of a young daughter. So she saw two things in the dream. First, the toxic symbology, and then the effect of it. It's gonna affect her heart.
All right. So how is this book different from your previous one?
Well, this is actually my third book. So in the first book, I just talked about I introduced the idea because I was introducing it to myself, making it more formal, which is the purpose and power of dreams. So that one, I just kind of talk about how, I guess it's like an origin story, like how I started interpreting dreams and all that sort of stuff. Then in both the Dream Detective books, I explain, and this is an important part of what I consider to be my purpose and my ministry. I explain exactly what I'm doing. There should not be confusion about it, it's very, very clear. Like in both books, I teach you how to interpret. If you go through the book, you will know the general model for interpreting dreams. In fact, you might get really, really good at it. I would actually describe these as occult books because what they do is they trigger your symbolic imagination. Right? That's what it does when you study dreams. People who dream a lot, they're typically, and they can remember it, they're typically deeply connected with their intuitive side. So when you work on dreams, but again, I also explain the rules, the principles, all my experience as a dream detective, because there's things that I've learned that I don't think people would know without it being noted or without a lot of experience. Like some of the ways that these things work, or how everybody's always giving it away, like always giving away the knowledge. But again, I want to make it clear that the fundamental experience of a dream is a cathartic episode. So you are feeling something. If you're in love, if you are worried, if you're concerned about your spouse cheating, if there's in some sort of addiction, pornographic addiction has come up a few times. If any of these things then get, because you're experiencing them emotionally, then they get expressed in the astral realm symbolically. And because they're such intense feelings, they generate like wild, intense imagery, right? Like in one of this, I'll just say quick, like one of the chapters is called Lucifer's Nightclub, because it's about this guy who's pursuing women, and he's like, and he calls himself a player. Like in real life, the guy calls himself a player. So in the dream, he's like in a nightclub, and he's rolling up with the ladies, and he's like, and then the lady takes him to the back and introduce him to this businessman. So it starts to get darker. They take him to the back of the club, and he's there, and he's looking around for fish, which are women, right? But he's only finding foxes, which are deceitful women, right? And then suddenly the man turns into a demon, into Lucifer, right? To destroy him. So again, like, wow. And I just told you that one really quickly, but like, even when I heard that, like, that's how it works. That guy was like, talking, like, that's how I met him. He was talking about like being a player and playing the game and like taking advantage of women. And then that dream, like, actually he met me, I would go as far as to say, to give him that warning. He did ignore it, by the way. He was like, hey man, thank you. I feel like I still got to do my thing. So I did my job in that way. But that's just, I just want to explain that example of how practical it is and what I'm actually explaining in the book. We're going into the depth of these, looking at how dreams work, then going into like these these glorious examples, then interpreting them, and then commenting on the themes of it. Like I did a little study of Lucifer, for example.
Are you going to be taking any dreams tonight?
Yeah. I mean, we can definitely.
All right. So if you want Michael to interpret your dream, just write it in the chat. It appears to me that.
Well, I will also say, I just want to also say, like, sometimes people actually have questions about different things of dreams, so that's fine as well.
Yeah, whatever you guys want. It appears to me that most of the analysis you have is your dreams revealing your problems or things you need to work on, right? Something that's going on in your life, or maybe that, something that you need to change. Do you ever get any analysis that your dreams are telling you you're doing something right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will actually use, I think, spontaneously, and there's a lot. I mean, so what you mentioned is true, but I would tell you, like, yeah, there's lots of things that your dreams are doing. They're really like an organ, but that's why if people don't, they miss a lot of their REM sleep, you start to get really sick, because this is similar to an organ. It's processing your issues. But anyway, so it'll process whatever is there, including, so I used to talk a lot about like there's stress, but then I always try to mention there's excitement, but that's because a lot of people don't have, we're struggling. So anyway, here's a quick example. Shout out to Susie. So me, Susie, and a few of us, we meet on the Discord and we have spiritual talks. right? And we encourage each other spiritually. We talk about these sort of things. So one day, Susie had a dream that we were dressed up in work gear, planting trees, right? And yeah, it was me, her, and I don't know who, you know, if anyone else was there. But that would be an example of, that's a very positive dream. That's a very positive dream because trees are divine ideas. Once we think about that, we're like, oh, of course, trees are divine ideas that are necessary for us to be. So yeah, so dreams can represent things that are positive. They can also be spiritual, all sorts of spiritual messages. But a lot of what comes up with the love and sexuality, there are frequently warnings both ways, warnings in many ways.
What about if like a woman had a dream about buying Louis Vuitton bags that are expensive, but getting them for $100, like black ones and brown ones, yellow?
Yeah.
What would that mean? I mean, I know that's just such a small little image of an entire, you know, just a piece of a dream. But if you're dreaming of getting something valuable,
yeah,
could that be interpreted as good things are going to be happening to you in your life?
So the way you should think about it is exactly what energy, because it's hard to explain how clear it is when you just think about the energy, like what the energy is saying. Like, in other words, if this was happening in real life, how would it be? Right. So you said the dream is that the person's getting something of value. And what was the second?
Yeah, like something of great value for a great price. Like, let's say Louis Vuitton bags that are thousands of dollars for $100.
Yeah.
Like they're dreaming they're at a store, maybe buying these, you know.
So there could be two aspects depending on like you would call it the clairvoyance of the person. So one of them could be symbolically that the person feels that's happening emotionally. So for example, let's say they meet someone in a relationship. This is a good example for this. So let's say they meet someone new in a relationship and they think the person is like the bee's knees. They're super handsome. They're just they're just like the most wonderful person, you see? And they feel like, wow, I'm not that great, but this person is still like loves me and is interested in me, right? That would begin to, can you begin to see how that would be an emotional correspondence to what you're describing about the bags, right? Where a person feels like they're getting a great value, right? So that's, again, how the principle works. The person's experiencing something in their life and then it gets expressed like that. And there could be, that being a positive dream. If a person is known to have clairvoyant dreams, then you can see, the thing is, when we talk about clairvoyant dreams, like, is this dream telling the future? Because that's part of what you're asking. It's like, okay, is this, is this dream reflecting something symbolically? Yes, that's possible. And then in some cases, is this dream foretelling the future? This becomes important with romance dreams because, for example, people have cheating dreams. And then they ask me, like, can my cheating dreams tell? Do my cheating dreams tell? And I can't say yes or no because it's actually based on the person's experience. Like, have you ever had a dream that was clairvoyant before? Like, do any of your dreams ever come true? That would be the obvious question we would ask.
All right. What does a dream of being on a tall building, a rooftop, and you witness a massive tsunami coming towards you, yet you wake up before the tsunami hits?
Yeah. So tsunami dreams, unfortunately, are actually very common, and they symbolize, like, this symbology here is not complicated, thankfully, right? So being high up in a place typically would, like, just to start that part is like, okay, because you said they were like high on a building, right? So that would typically symbolize something like either your status or your mindset, right? It's an elevated status or an elevated mindset because it's high, it's above the situation. And then what is coming is emotional overwhelm, because I'll tell you, like you and everybody, there's tons of people who are dreaming about tsunamis and waves, right? Now I can tell you, like, we won't go into it, but because the spirit realm is real, because the spirit realm is the real realm, that's very, very, that's very, very telling. Anyway, if a wave was coming at you, right? This is where, again, how do I interpret it? What would I be feeling if this was in real life? In real life, if the wave was coming out with me, I would feel completely overwhelmed. Now, it sounds like this person is bringing in awareness, because they're saying like they're waking up before it's happening or before it's reaching them. So that's bringing in awareness. I'll go faster.
All right. Here's another one. I also had a dream that someone I believed to be my son, and this person only has 2 girls in real life, drew a heart on her chest, and when I looked down, it had the number 11 inside of it. So a woman dreamed that she had a son. He drew a heart on her chest, and it had a number 11 in it, and she doesn't have any male children.
Okay. So I'm not going to go too deep in terms of like explaining it all. I'll explain some of it. And I'm explaining, right. I'm going now off of my intuitive capacity. So this woman, then, if she doesn't have a child, she's giving birth, right? So the son is metaphorical. It's something she's giving birth to, like her spiritual ideal, for example, okay? Her spiritual ideal is writing on her heart. The number 11 is the number of the last hour before the new day, before 12, so the number 11 symbolically represents the moment before you change into a new type of being, or it's a new day, is what it is symbolically. So that's very, very profound. I hope you God bless you on that. That's and again, that's a very powerful and positive dream.
That's interesting.
Really, 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 really profound. You got it, right? You got what I'm saying?
I was thinking number 11 is, as the money people say, is the angel number. So I was expecting something with angels, but that was interesting that it's right before the change.
Well, when I was haunted by the number of 11 for several years of my life, and so I studied it, and I went online and asked about it, and I was like, what does 11 mean? And like, there's all these people seeing 11s, and I was seeing 11s, and I knew it. I made videos about it. But when I sat down and stilled myself, like I stilled myself in meditation, because none of the answers were satisfying without, and so I went within, and I was like, what is and I just asked myself, and then it came to me. It was like, it spoke. It was like the last hour before a new day, and that's why I believe we're seeing 11s. That's why 9/11 is what it was, like, because it symbolizes the destruction of the 11. Anyway, but so a lot of people are seeing 11s because we're shifting, right? So in that way, what she is birthing, her son, which again is SON, it's the light being that we're giving birth to. Like, we can't go too deep into this, but we are going to give birth to a new sort of being. It's a spirit being. That's what we're giving birth to even right now, right? So that's the sun. And then the sun, that being that we're birthing, it reflects and works on us. That's why it's writing on her heart. That's so deep. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wonderful, wonderful. I hope you got that. Yeah.
All right. This one is Iris dreamed snakes were trying to bite her feet. Then her sister dreamed she pulled a snake out of Iris's mouth.
Oh boy. So first of all, I can't not mention, but I'll try to refocus. But there's two dreams in here that have snakes. So very, very interesting. So snakes can symbolize, there's a few levels of basic symbolic meaning. The most common is like, a fun way of thinking of it is unpleasant surprise. Like, that's why the idea is like snake in the grass, right? Because the thing's gonna come get you and like bite you and something like that. So a snake at your feet, let's see how, like, again, so Jeff, one of the things I've learned lately, and I even learned while writing this book, is that these things work as hieroglyphs. So we take the hieroglyphs and we just put them together and we make the message. So it's like this. Okay, so your feet, like, running or something like that, your feet, and then the snake, right? Right. So then we put those together. So something perhaps deceptive is influencing the way you're walking in life. You see, it's almost like maybe that's an easy way for people to do it. Just add in life the way, like take the metaphor, like, okay, how you're walking, but we would apply this emotionally or to your life is like something is seeking to hurt that, or you're perceiving that something could hurt that. There's a threat there. So in the dreams that, and what was the other one? There was another one with snakes, her sister, right? Oh, pulled the snake out of your mouth.
Right.
Okay. Whew. Okay. So snakes, the other thing that they're associated with, which is close, is like deception. So coming out of your mouth, that would mean that someone thinks you're like, maybe they think you're telling a lie, right? It's that sort of symbology. Something offensive is being removed from the mouth. So I'll say, just to, for context, for fun, one of the snakes that appeared in the dream was fascinating because it was an addiction. Okay. So, and basically the guy goes and he buys a king cobra. Okay, this is one of the great dreams that I included in here. The guy goes, and the name of the dream, the name of this book is the name of that dream is My Pet King Cobra, because the guy goes, he buys a pet king cobra that keeps trying to kill him. You get me? It keeps trying to kill him, and he tries to contain it in response, right? So it's like controlling an addiction. And I'll say one other one that's hilarious. The other one where the snakes appear a lot was this guy who was thinking about getting married, and he was asking his family. And as they started talking to him, it's like snakes came out from under their bed and jumped on him. So, really, really fascinating stuff.
What is the major takeaway that you want people to get after reading your new book?
Well, I always want to deliver the message of what kind of testimony dreams are giving us, right? Because we can start with the testimony. I like to think of it maybe like little kids. So if we go to our little kids, the kids in school and stuff, and they tell us they're crazy, crazy dreams, right? And then we're like, that doesn't mean anything. It's just you had too much Mexican food, right? Wah, 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 right? But when we tell that same child, when someone like me who can prove it over and over and over again goes and says to that little kid, your dreams are amazing. Your dreams, and this is the truth, our dreams are a testimony of our genius. It's the testimony of the genius of the human species. You have my word on that. That's what I see when I go through these dreams, right? Like, wow, and I also know that, again, that it begins to, like, I was talking with Susie, and she said, the thing is, dreams are a path to spiritual awakening. And that's kind of one of the things I'm also trying to deliver in this. And also to let people know you can do this yourself. You do have this intuitive capacity. It just needs to be like sort of turned on, the symbolic intuitive capacity. And in this last one in particular, it just was about taking a subject like this, going deeply into it, and then finding that the message that really stuck with me, Jeff, was this message of seeking wholeness. Like, it changed how I think about wholeness differently. It even kind of revealed to me more deeply that wholeness is the holiness that the church is looking for, right? It's like it's us being whole. We're seeking that, because here's where the part where everybody as an NDE audience can really vibe with me. Because you guys have heard the testimonies. You see, when we're home, when we're not here, we're whole. You see? So we come here and we experience being incomplete in a whole bunch of different ways. So many different ways. Like, for example, over there, we're perfectly healthy. Not here. Here it's arranged. Over there, we're perfectly beautiful. Not here. Right? All of that. So we're experiencing it, and we want to, because we have the memory, we want to experience that wholeness again. So it gets expressed like through love, through sex, through all these things that we're trying to meet this need, which I would say, that's probably my ultimate testimony to give, is that what we're seeking is actually the spirit come alive in us. That's why it's called, and I talk about this a little bit, that's why the Bible calls it the bride of Christ, because there is this romantic conception where we are becoming whole again. Yeah.
All right. This person says, I had a dream I was in a bad relationship that became abusive emotionally and almost physically abusive. And I had a dream that the devil came to me and screamed, I love you, and started laughing.
Well, I mean, in some cases, like dreams can be very clear, but to be clear, right? There's always like the symbology and then the application, and when they're completed, then that's when you've really solved the case. So with this person, I would have to do a little bit of dream detective work because there doesn't seem to be like a lot of mystery with the dream. Like if somebody's in an abusive relationship, it's either like this: hey, where do you see that in your life? That, by the way, just me doing that to the person, or me even the person, if they're hearing me right now and they really ask themselves that question, that will begin to resolve that issue. Because it's either they're having a romantic, abusive relationship, or it could be something else that's represented that's a harmful relationship.
Like a bad boss or something.
Yeah, or an addiction, right? Because it's very, very intimate, right? But yeah, it could be that's a good example too.
All right. I live on the southern west coast and have dreamed of the water being all the way up to my window a couple times. Didn't see the wave though.
So this is another good example, very good with the sort of hieroglyphics. Let's look at it. Maybe people can even do it before I say it, right? So you take the window, and then we're like, what is a window? Like, let's do it like we were kids. We're like, what is a window? Well, that's something I look through. So it's like perspective. It's how I look out at the world. Okay. And then there's water rising up above it. So I'm feeling that, right? If we enter into it in the language, in that place of imagination, which we're able to do, we'll feel that what's happening. So I'm looking, I have perspective, but then that perspective feels like it's being overwhelmed. That's the general idea that's going on.
Like being underwater.
Yes, exactly. And it's specifically saying your perspective is being overwhelmed because windows represent perspectives.
All right.
One of my favorite okay, I won't go into it, but yeah, I've had a few dreams on windows, and they're like really, really fascinating. The curtains, everything means something.
I dreamed last night about having a rubber band fight. The rubber bands were no good. Then we started to wrestle in a vehicle. We were friends in the 5th grade. He died at 17 in a car accident. So dreaming of a friend on the other side.
Okay. Well, again, once in a while we get dreams that are like spiritual and, like a spiritual visitation. And the characteristic of these, as a footnote, is they're very lucid rather than sort of unclear. But now she said that, I'm sorry, what was she doing? What was happening with the friend?
They were having a rubber band fight, but the rubber bands were not good. And then they started wrestling.
So there's this spiritual element because it's about the friend, but we can root it in the symbology and look at the symbology because it's always going to speak very deeply. So a rubber band, again, like we could do this, right? Like real basic. Like a rubber band is about like being stretchy, being flexible. So maybe, for example, people could be like, and there's wrestling there. So I would think that that's like people debating and arguing about stuff. You see the energy that's there? That's the wrestling energy. Now, these people are, it's more of a lighthearted because they're also kind of like they're open-minded. That's why there's rubber bands involved, right? Because they're flexible. So you can kind of that's one of the essential energies that's going on in this interaction. So I don't, there's an element over that. I'll just say quickly that where you have the symbology, and this is where it becomes personal. When a family or friend or someone who has passed, you take the meaning and you overshadow it with spirit. That's how you should think of it. If you have a regular symbolic dream, oh, I was in a maze, and right, and I didn't know which way to go. Okay, that's confusion about direction. If somebody appears from the spirit realm in that dream, it would be confusion about spiritual direction. See, it overcasts it and gives it it imbues it with spiritual overtones whenever somebody appears from the spirit realm. That's just straight. Just like, for example, the principle that when you dream about something many times, that's your subconscious mind being like, hey, we're trying to reach you about this particular issue.
I dreamt that I was in a Delaware suburb, a place I've never been, and I found a portal gate to a suburb in England where everyone was much friendlier and affectionate.
Can you say it one more time?
The person dreamt that, well, let me just kind of reread it. I dreamt that I was in a Delaware suburb, a place I've never been, and I found a portal gate to a suburb in England where everyone was much friendlier and affectionate.
So, I mean, the basic sense I get from it is, okay, so when a person is in a place that they've never been before, that you could kind of say that out loud, like, oh, I'm experiencing something in my life that is unusual. It's a place I've never been before. But then on top of that, there's this idea of them sort of making progress. So, for example, I might guess that this person is just connected to a new community, because that's open, right? And that's accepting. So that's why they would say, oh, and I went through this tunnel and I met these people who were very nice.
All right. I have dreamed.
And by the way, that is a very positive, that's another example of a positive spiritual dream, I would say.
I have dreams about airports and gates and going through customs and going on planes.
So this tells us that the person has a concern about like going, like it would be traveling as a theme, but it's this particular part about going from one state to another in the travel. I'm trying to think of what emotion that is. I guess because in other words, it's about traveling or making progress, and it's about getting past this obstacle, right? Like, you know how you feel when you go to the airport and you're like, oh, take off your shoes, take off your belt, right? So, and then how you feel on the other side, which is kind of like, maybe people would talk about that as relief, right? So this is what's being represented here. The movement, like making progress over something. Again, it's generally associated with travel. And it's like a challenging point.
All right. I've dreamt of coming home to a place I used to live. When I walked in there, there were 2 white lions there and a Bengal tiger and a white tiger that were there to greet me very kindly and friendly.
So now this may seem strange to people, and they'll be like, can you really interpret like dreams? And yeah, you can interpret every single dream, and it's not, the general idea is not particularly difficult. You just have to get used to them. So, for example, lots of people say to me, oh, so Michael, in my dream, I was back in my house, my childhood house. That is literally what's happening in the dreamer, is they're revisiting an earlier part of themselves. That's one way you think of it. Like those emotions that are related to that thing, like who they are, that they never dealt with when they were 15 years old, those emotions still exist. In their dream realm, they go back and they're like, oh, I was a kid. I was like, so now sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's cleaning up, it's all sorts of things. But this person is going back to this element in themselves, and it's actually a very positive experience, because what it's implying is courage and power. Because if you, like, for most people, if they're like lions and tigers, like that's what you would those are very noble symbols, right? Now I want to say, because I've been studying a lot, trying to get even better and better at dreams and interpretation, all the levels, that I really have learned and perceived that the deepest levels of interpretation are found when you connect to the dreamer. So I'm kind of just tossing out the symbology, and the symbology is not random. It's not random. Okay, it's never random. They always have it always has a particular meaning, but that meaning is used according to the mind of the dreamer. Like they're the dream dictionary. So they take the particular thing, if it's like a whale or a bug or whatever, and then they use it according to their emotional makeup.
If people want to find out more about your new book, Michael, should they go to Amazon or do you have a website?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, and it's I sent you the links, and I have the link on my YouTube page, Instagram page, all over. So yeah, very easy to get, or you also just easily type of Dream Detective, and it comes up in Amazon as well. And it is I am doing, being wise and having it on sale for throughout the month of February. But yeah.
All right. Do you have anything else going on that you want people to know about?
Well, I am doing a lot of posting, so for those interested, I mean, some people on more on YouTube also, but I do a lot on Instagram, and also I'm doing some on Facebook now. I also interpret dreams one-on-one, which I guess that's super clear. And I am going to be doing some classes. So I have those classes modeled out, but and I haven't started promoting them yet. But I'm going to be doing some classes on dream interpretation.
Do you have a book or ever considered writing a book that's like a dictionary of like every symbol you can think of and what it means?
So I have thought about that, and it was also funny because my mom found a dream dictionary one day, and that's kind of like my one little reference that I use because I like to go off the top of my head. But when I thought about it, right, I was like, nah, I can't. Like, I don't think you could do it because, like I said, there's two major problems. First of all, there's so many symbols, it's hard to even begin to define where to start at, even though, again, I am kind of working on that, but it's just so many. And then you have to have so many footnotes for each symbol, right? Like explaining, so like, oh, how you would apply this, why it, so you have to kind of give people a sense of why it means this. But I will tell you, I have been thinking about, so we'll see if that comes to pass. I have been thinking about cards, dream cards, like instead of tarot cards, because that's basically that makes more sense to me, you know.
That's interesting. What do you mean? Like you just put a symbol on a card and
Yeah. So just like for example, one of the sets of meaning that I've talked about and gone into detail are how the house represents the soul and the rooms of the house represent the states of the soul that they go into. So for example, ideas like that, all the stuff that's in the house, the windows, the doors, all those have very straightforward symbolic meanings, and you could put those and make those into little groups. Maybe I would do some animals, but again, it gets challenging. Animals are great, lots, but like here's a little clue for some of y'all. Here's a cute one. Dreamers often dream of their habits as pets. Right. So, so maybe a pet card, but basically, yeah, think of it as like a tarot card where on one face you would have the symbol and then you would have the explanation on the other side.
all right, that's pretty cool. Well, if people want to contact
Yeah.
you, what's the best way to do so?
You can go to my page. You'll see all my links there. Like my link tree has everything. So my link tree has, like, if you want to make a session with me, if you want to check out books, if you want to check out my own webpage, my own Strikingly page, which is like a portfolio. So I have in there like dreams I've done, testimonies from people, all that sort of stuff.
All right. Well, Michael, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Yeah, I'm surprised actually. I guess it worked out perfectly that where I end the book that I think is sort of, talking about wholeness, where it becomes interesting is I realize that dreams, well, sorry, let me set this up a little better. So dreams are a message to the dreamer. Every dream, that's my message. Every dream is a personal message to the dreamer. But when you get it, if you don't know what it means, you're not whole. You see, you got the message, and people can feel this in their soul. Like, oh, what was that? Like, what was that dream about? And that's the thing that's beautiful, is that interpretation makes you whole. Interpretation, where you're provided with the meaning, it's given to you, it can't be taken, and now you've become whole with the intent of the dream.
Michael, thank you for your message. Thank you for coming and interpreting all these dreams tonight. I wish you massive success with your book.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening and sharing, everybody.
All right, Michael, thanks again, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, you too.
And that was our own Michael. All right, guys, once again, tomorrow night's podcast is going to be with hospice nurse Julie. And we talked about her angel encounter, when we talked about some other amazing things about dying, the process of dying, and things like that. I think it's a really informative video, and as we talked about during it, it's something that even the average healthcare provider doesn't know unless you worked in her field. So I think it's cool, and I hope you check it out. Once again, if you would like to friend me, you can do so. My name is Jeff Reynolds. The link to my personal Facebook page is below. I'm accepting all the friends until I hit 5,000, and then I can't anymore. There's a link to our Facebook page, and then there's a really cool video of a UFO from our own John Martin that just sent to me the other night, so I recommend checking that out if you're into UFOs. There are links to our other channels, and I took out the Discord because I had to take down I didn't make it public for the Discord, what is that you need? You need like a passcode to get into Discord. So if you want to join our Discord, it's free to do. You just go to Discord, sign up for your own personal profile, and then you email me, which my email address is also down in the description below. You email me for a passcode to join, and I will send that to you personally. That's about it. Let me see what is going on for next Saturday night. These are really starting to fill up. I have Michelle Claire, and she was a guest a long time ago, and then Mike Vess I don't know if he's newer, from a long time ago as well. I didn't put any notes in there, which I should have. But I hope to see you guys back next Saturday. Thank you all so much for watching our videos. We love you guys. God bless you, and have a great evening. Good night.